from its source. On the other hand, the narrative about death and resurrection of Christ mimics the universal pattern of mythological and religious symbolism that is the story of self-forgetting and self-discovery. Consequently, birth, in the mystical sense, signifies the recuperation of something that has been lost or forgotten. Stus's speaker observes this convention when he first proclaims, "In me God is already being born." "У мені вже народжується Бог." This occurs in a poem from the Joyful Cemetery, whose introductory lines describe God as being half remembered and half forgotten, напівпам'ятний, напівзабутий. Stus's mythical speaker identifies this God as a constant companion. "I and he both live together. In two I exist, where there is no one else. Я з ним удвох живу, удвох існую, і коли нікого." But in the second part of the poem, God, Ben with a capital letter, turns into a contradictory deity, Bog with a small letter, that is both a suffering and a raging entity. Він хоче поза мене вийти, прагне, рятуючи, донищити мене, аби на протязі, на бур'яних вітрах я вийшов сам із себе, наче шабля. And I won't read the remainder of the poem. The cycle of self-consummation and self-reproduction, which Skovoroda described in reference to the sea, is presented in Stus as a paradoxical and painful struggle. It appears that Stus's speaker conjoins a conventional description of the coming forth into consciousness of man's deeper spiritual self, that is the generation of the divine logos, with a biblical military metaphor to describe the self-inflicting birth of poetry. Shabya. Let us recall that in the book of Revelations, a book that Stus really enjoyed reading, the sword is a symbol of the judging logos. In Skovoroda's contemplative garden, it represents the consoling logos of the psalmist, of Paul, St. Augustine, and many other narcissi, as Skovoroda designates the authors that he loves. But Skovoroda is also a writer, not only a reader, and thus the act of writing the songs is his manner of waging war on destructive psychological states. Judging from the poem "У мені вже народжується Бог", for Stus's mystical speaker, the liminal state is the most conducive for creativity. Recognizing that the logos is both destructive and palliative, he seeks to conjoin the antithetical powers and thus turn his writing into an intense interstice between illumination and darkness. Notice that he says, "А я ще тую свічку просвічу, аби мені не смеркло передчасно. Про світлої години свічка чорна, неначе перемога крадькома." I'm coming toward the end. The palimpsest contains two poems that begin with the line, "In me God is already being born," the title of this poem. One of them is a reinscription of the text that I have just considered. It contains minor changes in the body of the text and a different ending. The other poem is altogether different. It describes a mystical flight with the speaker approaching the sun in joyful expectation of the final hour. He talks about sudden and constant self-immolations and the perpetual return into the body. Implicit in this description is the image of the self-regenerating phoenix. Interestingly, there is no mention of the struggle with the raging deity of poetry. Instead, there is quiet acceptance that the speaker is merely a transient in this world and has no desire to return to it. He concedes that perhaps his memory might return. As he exclaims, here they skinned me alive. Memory. That is all. Хіба що пам'ять. Тут лупили шкуру живцем із мене. Пам'ять. От і вже. This is one of the rare instances when the mystical speaker makes such a concrete reference to the life of his author. Anamnesis does play an important function in the oeuvre of Stus, pam'ять, but it is as a rule articulated by other non-mystical voices. Stus, like Skovoroda, did not speculate about the afterlife. His constant struggle was to find solutions that would poetically reconcile the contradictions between personal rage and the mystical quest. The only poem in Stus's extant oeuvre that alludes to a face-to-face encounter with the great Narcissus is written in the third person. I think I have here, yeah? Is written in the third person and names neither persona, neither the great Narcissus or Narcissus himself. The meeting occurs after the death of a suffering Narcissus who is cast as a flower being mourned by the Pantocrator. This Greek title, as you already know, means Almighty and is normally used in reference to an omnipotent icon of Christ with his right hand poised to make a blessing. Той бідний виквіт рідної землі, що кроплений Дніпровою водою, своєю присягався головою, що розпізнав рахманний біль землі. Уже його покраяно, потято, пожовкло рано вигнане стебло, а там, де жебоніло джерело, схилив чоло байливий Пантократор. You might recognize that basically here we have a very classical treatment of the divine Narcissus. In other words, the Son of God, in his divinity, looks into the reflection in the water, Jadala, and recognizes human nature. And he so much falls in love with human nature that he decides to sacrifice himself to die in order to restore human nature into grace. Regeneration in the poetry of Stus strictly pertains to the